Welcome to the Saints of City and Me, a podcast delivering audio love letters to and from the city of New Orleans and our New Orleans Saints. On this episode, we welcome someone that I'm sure you're all more than familiar with. He is the creator of the Life of a Saint series. Welcome to the show, Saint John Butler. John, how you doing?
How are you, fellas? Pleasure to finally make this work. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's good. It's good. How are things?
Everything is fantastic. Today has been an exceptionally good day. Actually spoke to Pierre Thomas like 3 hours ago, and then I get to speak to you guys afterwards. I mean, it's like the cherry on
John,
top.
Calm down. Calm down.
How am I doing? All right.
So we're going to say,
yeah.
Pierre was the warm-up act for us, and
exactly.
This is the main event.
Exactly.
Off the top rope. Let's go.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, you sort of touched on Pierre there, so that's obviously Saints related. I think the first thing we want to dip into is the Saints, where they are, what's happening. What are your feelings? Obviously, the big news was Chase Young this week, and then the bigger news was Chase Young again this week. What are your thoughts on everything that's going on, John?
Well, I would say that the Chase Young thing, I was one of those fans that initially was like, oh, this is just the Saints being the Saints, not doing their homework but it's nice to hear that they went into the contract with the right clauses in there, that they were able to save themselves from total annihilation if this didn't work. So I think the fact that a couple of teams knew that there was an issue with the neck and were still willing to speak to him, and the Saints actually put their money up, I think it bodes well for him actually being ready to play come week one. I'm hoping
that was the thing. It was the fully. I think obviously everybody was excited when majority of fans were excited when it first hit the news, and then obviously when the second part of the news hit about the neck injury, and everybody was up in arms about the fully guaranteed contract, weren't they? But the legend that is Kai Hartley, playing his game. I mean, I listened to, I think it was Ross when he was explaining it, and my head was spinning as he was sort of explaining it. Anyway, the fact that Kai sort of thinks that way is wonderful for us, but it negates some of the liability, doesn't it? It's if the guy's not playing, obviously we still have to make payments, but then you can get a credit the following year, and so your cap sort of balances itself out over that 2-year period. So. Which is required.
I was going to say, and it's nice that we have somebody like Ross that can kind of take the contract and break it down into layman's terms for knuckleheads like me, so.
Still some of these contracts that come out, I have to revert to our friend Di, who's pretty good on his stuff, and said, can you just tell me what this actually means? Because I just don't understand. But I mean, there's an argument. I think Ross was making an argument that maybe Kai should go into the Hall of Fame for what he's done to the being able to manipulate the salary cap. I'm not sure the NFL would necessarily agree, but he's doing God's work on the salary cap.
I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, I take it that news was being delivered to you, John, via your fridge, which I think we all saw.
You saw that. That was too funny. Yeah. Actually, if you look at that clip in the background, you could see one of those like Swiffer cleaners. So I was actually in the process of cleaning my floors, and I was like, you know what? Let me just see if the fridge will actually spit out his podcast. And sure enough, I was like, I gotta make a quick video of this. But you can see it in the background. So he kept me company while I was cleaning.
Fridge envy is not something I thought I'd ever get on Saints Twitter, but there you go. I have it now.
There you go. It's funny, that refrigerator, I mean, to completely get off topic with you, that refrigerator, we moved a couple of years ago. We were in like a big Victorian. We downsized into a townhouse. And when we moved, my daughter was pretty broken up that we were leaving that house because she had so many memories in there. So she's like, all right, the only way I'm not going to give you too much trouble is if you buy a fridge with the touchscreen in the front. I was like, all right, well, small price to pay. So that's why we ended up with that fridge in the first place.
Yeah, well done, that girl.
Those I don't. Well, I was gonna say those fridges are smart. They obviously are, but I saw one in Costco once, and I was looking at it, and then I was in the car driving back, and all of a sudden I started getting ads for the fridge on Instagram and Facebook. And I was just
That's creepy. That's creepy.
It's just weird. Weird. Like, I didn't even talk about the fridge. It's like this. That's just. It scares me. Some of that
it's
stuff.
Too much. Yeah, it's definitely too much.
Wi-Fi connects or something, or Bluetooth.
Yeah. Dan's just walking around with a router in his brain. It's completely unaware. Yeah. So overall, I think obviously, we're a bit happier now having heard the contract, but also yet again, look, just like even if he can get us anything between 7 and 10 sacks, if and when he is sort of ready to go, that'd be great to have that.
That would be huge. That'd be huge because Granderson, I mean, he had a great season last season, but Granderson is like a number 2. Like that's what you should expect from your number 2. And I'm hoping that Cam can be Cam. See, here's what tripped me up. If Young plays well out of the gate and Granderson's playing as well as he has, like Cam typically has like a slow start to a season. He usually starts like once he hits that second half, he starts piling up his sacks. If he doesn't get the reps because those two guys are rolling, I mean, maybe he's just going to turn into like a third down guy or like a situational guy. I don't know, but super interesting for a guy like Cam Jordan. Like, I don't know. I'm another one of those seasons where I just have no idea what to expect in certain areas of the game, which is becoming more and more common.
Well, you wonder whether there'll be, you want Dennis Allen to play people on merit, don't you? And who's performing, and you don't want him to just sort of have nostalgia towards a player and go, Cam's been here. I can't just. You just got to be. It sounds awful, but you got to be ruthless in some ways and go, do you know what? These are the two guys that are performing. You're going to, like you say, you're going to be a third down guy. You're going to be situational. If you're not willing to move inside on plays, then you're not going to be in on the NASCAR plays either. You're going to be, it's going to be Passigno on those plays with those guys. So be really interesting to see what he does with Cam, because you want it to be like a graceful exit over the next couple of years. You don't want it to just, him to be disgruntled. I'm not getting snaps and stuff. So it's going to be really interesting how he manages that. That will be a real test of him as a head coach, to see how he manages that. But Cam's not silly. He knows how to play the game. He'll play the media, and he won't say anything out of turn. But he's in the locker room, I suppose. Got some old heads on that defense who know how the game plays out. So it's going to be a test for Dennis Allen, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say, I have no problem with nostalgia when it comes to, if you want to give Cam like the extra year on a contract or something like that, like keeping him around. I mean, his leadership and just the way he kind of keeps that team kind of glued together defensively. But playing time is a different thing. And if one guy's producing and one guy isn't, to me, you can't be nostalgic when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
No, and yet again, I think like Dan touched on it with the old heads. I think yet again, he doesn't seem to me to be precious in that sense. I think he just seems to be a little bit selfless. Obviously, that you've got to have a type of mentality when you play that game. But also the good thing about it is that he's one of these people that I think he would go in to camp and he would help the people around him regardless. Right. And I think that was one of the key things that Chase Young said about, although didn't he say about something about Cam Jordan, but that was something like about in 2019, they cut that snippet out of the media thing. So, which was a little bit interesting, but I just, again, what you want is you want there to be an issue where actually, Jesus Christ, we got 3 of these guys and really only 2 of them can play at any given time. What are we going to do? And, so if you're getting a guy who's got 10 sacks, but the other 2 are getting 7.5 and 8 or whatever, then, yet again, we'd be happy with that.
Sign me up. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, you'd also like to see Foskey maybe make a step up as well and compete for a starting spot. So
that would be nice too.
Turner, Turner, I've almost written off. If he comes back and does nice things and beautiful, I'll be over the moon with it. Nice problem to have. But, need to see Foskey have a bit of a sophomore year step up, I think, for sure.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah,
agreed.
What about the other free agents that have come in? John, have you got any major thoughts on those? Cedric Wilson.
Yeah, the couple of the receivers. Yeah, it sounds like they're going to be special teams primarily, and then you might get some 4 and 5 wide spreads where you can get them out there. Gay is a nice addition as like a third linebacker, and depending how much we see Werner, maybe a second linebacker. But I don't know. I'll ask you guys. Does it almost feel like, with the way they've handled free agency this offseason, does it feel like maybe we're trying to be a little bit smarter with our money, or is this just because it just, I don't know, this year to me had a different feel to it. It kind of had like a, let's not extend everybody, for the next 10 years. Let's try and reel some of this back in. So I was curious what you thought.
I think so. The way they've handled some of the contracts, not just done standard restructures, they've, what they did with Taron and DeMario, did not standard restructures. The fact they haven't touched like Taysom's contract for a restructure, they haven't touched AK's there, and then the players they've brought in, I think, rather than just going big blowout money, they're being sensible about it. It feels like, to your point, they're being a bit more sensible, pulling the purse strings in a little bit, maybe one eye on. I don't. We've talked about it being potentially a soft reset. But it definitely feels as though there's a preparation to try and get the cap in a bit of a better position than it was before, rather than just keep kicking it down the road. Because I think I think the projections are in two years' time they've got like 256 million in cap space, which one says there's not a lot of people signed up to be with the organisation in 2027 or 2026. But it also shows that they're sort of rebalancing, I suppose.
I think it's 2026 is when, 2026 is when I think the cap starts to look manageable and generous. And I think, to your point, John, I think they're sort of looking towards that and thinking, like, let's pull the reins back a little bit. So actually, when we get to that point, because obviously I think at that time is probably the time when you can sort of really seriously think about getting rid of the QB as well. So I think they're just putting themselves in a position whereby maybe they can make a splash, because they always seem to, over the last few years, sign. They always seem to have a little bit of a headline signing and stuff. And to be fair, to a point, Chase Young is that. But I do think that they're pulling the reins back and they're thinking, right, let's look towards the next couple of years whereby Carr probably won't be in the building, and then we really do. That's probably when we do have to have the reset at that point,
right? And
let's have some money to do it.
Well, I do wonder if there's one eye on the. I know Mickey's come out and been very vocal in support of Dennis Allen, but I do wonder if there's one eye on them saying we don't really want to be saddled with players on big contracts, and then it doesn't work out with DA, and he moves on, and all of a sudden the new head coach comes in and goes, I don't want any of these players. So I wonder if there's a little bit of that. That's my soccer mentality coming in, because if you're not 100% on the manager, you don't let them go out and spend a lot of money on players in case you're going to get rid of them 6 games into the season. But it's a different kind of mindset we have over here when it comes to sort of bringing in players to a soccer team.
No, it makes.
Are you into soccer?
You're kind of. God, I'm sorry.
No, crack on. I was going to change subject. You crack on.
I was going to say that it makes sense, because you're kind of hamstringing the next coach, no matter who it is, if DA doesn't work out to a lot of these contracts. Some guys aren't even here anymore. But I guess in fairness of the next guy, I mean, I'm sure that's not high on their priority list, but in fairness to the next guy, it would be nice to get rid of at least some of that future money. So.
Well, I mean, if you look at it, even now, some of the dead cap we're dealing with, that was trying to get that championship for Drew and Sean and their back end years, like just sort of kicking the can down the road. So we're almost there. And I think, whilst we all say the cap's a fallacy and things, that there is an element of truth to the fact that you do have to pay the piper at some point. And I'd rather let Kai work through it and pay it in increments on layaway, rather than the bill coming all at once.
Amen.
But then you see that in the fact that we signed Chase Young, and some people are up in arms about the 13 million guarantee. But part of the thing is that's all we could afford. We couldn't go anywhere else. And to your point, Dan, it's if if there is a free agent who's a stellar free agent, we probably can't go after them.
it's interesting because the defensive end market, everyone, like I've been banging on in our WhatsApp groups and stuff about, hit defensive ends in free agency, deal with the O-line in the draft, because I'm a strong believer in like stellar offensive linemen do not come up in free agency because teams know the value of top O-linemen and they're not going to let them go. But then you saw the market for defensive ends. You just like, haven't even got the money to do anything with it. We optimistically thought we might get Daniil Hunter, and he's like, can't afford that. And like anyone north of Daniil Hunter, like I thought we might be able to get Bryce Huff. Nope. It's just like the market went nuts for defensive ends.
Agreed. Yeah. It'll be nice someday to be able to kind of eye up who the top name free agents are going to be that year, and kind of have the team actually have a plan to position themselves to get one of them. But
and you saw it on Saints Twitter. It was like on the first day of free agency or the first day of tampering and whatnot, and all these big money moves were being made, and some people were up in arms, and they were like, you were sort of sitting back there thinking, we are not making a move on the first day of free agency. We can't afford to. Because really only those top level players go at that point. So we always knew it was going to be day 2 or 3, apart from one exception, Dan.
Yeah, but I tend to feel that you get the same teams every year who can make a splash on day 1, and they're not necessarily successful teams every year. And there's a reason they make a splash. And they swing and never seem to hit. I don't think a lot.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I mean they're dumping all their money on one guy that's not really going to make a difference long term when they've got like. So,
how many times do you see the Jaguars make a swing on day 1?
Dan, you're so English.
I just mix it up.
Have you seen them Jaguars?
Look, our demographic is 43% US listeners, 42% UK listeners. So I have to make sure I get the pronunciation.
Cater to everybody,
cater to. But you look at the Jags. They swing every day 1. Yeah, pretty much. They don't do anything with it. It's like I think there's some teams have a mentality of we've got to make a splash on day 1, and it doesn't necessarily correlate back to success. I don't think.
No,
right.
Well, there's a reason they got cap space.
I was going to say the same fans that were upset that we didn't make a splash on day 1 are the same fans that also were upset that we didn't hire an offensive coordinator right away, and talking about how terrible the Saints are and nobody wants to come here and everything like that. So
absolutely. And that's a fair. That's because that's off-season talk, John. How do you feel about the whole Clint Kubiak situation? Are you happy with what they've done there?
Yeah, I mean, look, it seems like he was number 1 on a lot of people's lists. So I'm excited. I'm obviously watching San Francisco and seeing what they're capable of offensively, and then, taking a look at the Saints and seeing what pieces that we have. And I think we've all played the same game where, this guy's going to be McCaffrey, this guy's going to be Ayuk, this guy's going to, so you can kind of piece it together offensively. And then as long as DA kind of gives him the offensive reins and lets him just run with it, I think we're going to be in pretty good shape. My only concern is the offensive line and just piecing that together and making sure that we can keep Carr upright. That's all.
Yeah. Dan was touched. Sorry, Dan. I was just saying you were touching on the O-line a little bit earlier. From a draft perspective, John, is that somewhere that you would sort of look to sort of beef up in the first round? Is it
absolutely
Yeah, I mean it's pretty strong this year, isn't it? In sort of in that area, sort of going through the sort of the first 2 rounds of the draft. But it just feels that we have to really make a hit there, don't we?
Yeah, and it never you almost never go wrong if you've got like a can't miss kind of guy. Unfortunately, we have gone wrong with some guys that weren't really can't miss guys, and they were kind of stretches, but we don't have to go down that list. But when you've got a chance to get somebody that is proven, I'll be honest with you, I am not. I'm from Jersey, so there aren't big college programs near me. I mean, we got Rutgers, we got Princeton, but you've got to travel a couple hours to get to any decent school. That's Penn State is probably the closest one we've got. So I never really grew up a college football fan, so I kind of rely on people like you and people like, like some of the other analysts to kind of show what's what as far as who's. But the one kid from Penn State, I did marry into a Penn State family. The one kid from Penn State is a monster. That kid's a beast. I'd like to get him. That one tackle from Penn State.
Which one is that? That's
what the heck is it? I could look up his name, but he's got one of those. There's a lot. It seems like there's a lot of guys that with names I can't pronounce this year.
Yeah. Well, we might be talking about it before, because in the US everyone's talking about Fashanu, whereas in the UK we would pronounce that fashion you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I've got an idea.
Yeah, that's him. That's him, right?
Because I've been watching a lot of Theo Johnson, the tight end at Penn State, because Ross Jackson turned me on to him. So I've seen, the players there and what they've done. Obviously the O-line as well. But I think it'd be interesting to see that. I'm intrigued to see how those early picks in the first round go, because if there's a run on QBs, and then I think after the QBs there'll be a run on the wide receivers, because those top 3 wide receivers people won't want to miss out on.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I wonder whether the Saints would, if like Joe Alt falls, whether they'll go.
Yeah.
Well, we could move up here and get the best offensive lineman in this draft class. I know a lot of people wouldn't necessarily like it, but he's probably the most slam dunk out of all the tackles that are in the class. So
yeah, the only problem there for me is we haven't got the draft capital for that this year. We really haven't. We've got hardly any mid-range picks. You know what I mean? So It's like, so what do you move up with? And then you're going to have to move up with maybe a 2025 pick. And we're sort of talking on the point whereby maybe soft reset is the wrong term, but we're doing something like that at the moment. And then so for next year to sort of give away a couple of picks, to me, doesn't work. I mean, personally, I've said it before, and I'd move back and just get a couple more, because I think the strength in that area in this draft is so strong that I think that there's a distinct possibility that you're going to get someone half decent. But that's the beauty of it. I mean, the other thing, and I was saying to Dan prior to this, like the whole, again with the draft, one of the things is what happens with Lattimore, because if Lattimore goes, surely if you know that he's going to be going before you hit the draft, surely that changes your approach to the draft, because you're letting a top 5 corner leave your franchise for what reason I don't know, but then that surely changes the way that you view the draft a little bit, because then there's suddenly you could go through the Saints team and there are needs in virtually every position group. So actually, it's I don't think it makes much difference, to be honest. I
agree. Yeah, Lattimore makes the whole unit better, because everybody that's good kind of goes down one peg, and your what would be for best guy is handling the second best receiver. So I mean, to me, and then the other thing is I would always rather have, like Lattimore, we know who he is, we know what he's capable of. I would much rather have the guy than roll the dice on somebody that, in the draft that you're hoping can be half of what Lattimore is. I mean, that's me. That's one guy that's worth every dime he's getting paid. So
he's one of the top 3 cornerbacks in the league, and he just doesn't get the hype that the other, those other ones get. I see people still rate Ramsey above him. I'm just like, no, I'm not buying that. I'm not buying that. You might not be selling it, but I'm not buying it either.
Right?
Yeah, and also if you don't retain Lattimore, it really disbalances the team, in the sense that you then have to start thinking about, right, so you were trying, so it's almost like a failed development of Alontae Taylor in that sort of slot nickel area, because then you're going to have to move him outside. Then who are you going to move in there? We haven't got really anybody high caliber to go in there. And it's just suddenly, it's all of the pieces sort of slightly move out of shape. And it's like, again, even though, Lattimore was injured last year, those DBs held up, and our pass rush was pretty poor. But those DBs really, really held up, which yet again, you could argue, all right, but they held up, so you don't need Lat. But then we've lost a couple of people from that DB group in the off season, I just think keep him, and then it's just an easier draft, because otherwise you're then starting to have to think about other areas of concern.
Right. 100%. Or like they were probably the strongest unit we've had over the last couple of years. So I don't know why you go take your best piece and throw it away on the hopes that somebody's going to turn out to be decent or move up a couple of slots in the first. To me, it's not worth it.
No, and obviously with things like, even though, not an essential place, but Isaac Yadam moving on, and understandably, because he's probably going to be sort of contesting for a starting job now that he's headed off. But he was a fairly, even though, he at times he got slightly tortured, he was still a key piece. And when Lattimore was out, he held up. And so you haven't got him. And so you're going to have to shift that whole defensive back situation all around. And I just think, please, it's not worth it. Whatever your problems are with that player, sort them the fuck out, please.
Right.
Sorry,
strong words. Strong words.
Hey, look. I'm just glad I'm not the one that broke the seal on this episode. That's all.
John, we know you've listened to a couple of these, but you might have listened to the ones where we were a little bit more better behaved. If you've listened to any of the ones where we're not better behaved, that was light work.
Yeah, because your last episode, it started out PG, but it worked its way towards something different.
I think I'm sure that's why we get, as I said on the last episode, I'm sure that's why we get certain players go, yeah, I'll come on. And then they probably listen to a couple and go, no.
Yeah. Dan always does that. Whenever Dan's trying to get somebody on, whether it's a player or it's a respected this one or that one, always tries to point them in the direction of about 4 or 5 pod episodes that we've done where we've been very, very well behaved.
Check these only. Yeah.
But unfortunately, I think
the rest are after dark.
They probably just go to the latest one that was released, and that was certainly not one they should have listened to.
It was good though. You guys are always entertaining. Always a blast.
Aim to please. As Ross said, we give an insight to being fans on the other side of the ocean, which is the UK and a lot of drinking. But his way of saying they drink too much. But I appreciate you, Ross, always.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else, Dan, Saints-wise, you'd like to cover off, my friend?
I don't think so. Obviously, Chase Young stuff is the big news. I'm relatively pleased with the free agency signings. I quite like Wilson. I think he'll probably play more than people think. I watched some tape that Ross pulled together on him, and he's actually, when he was, forget his time at the Dolphins, his time in the Dallas, he actually looked like he could be a good contested catch kind of guy. Can play outside, inside. As a wide receiver 3 or 4, while A.T. Perry develops, I'm quite happy with that. And if we get someone like Lad McConkey or I really like Xavier Legette. If we get one of those two in the later round, second round or 4th, 5th round in the draft, I'll be quite pleased with that wide receiver room.
Yeah, but again, wide receiver in this draft is a pretty strong area as well, isn't it? So I
just feel like whenever I look at the draft, I see so many players in positions that I would like for the Saints, and not having 3rd and 4th round picks is just. So I think they're going to package some of those 5s up with something to move up, but we'll see. We'll see. It makes day 3 more entertaining.
There you go. Actually, but before you get off the current Saints stuff, I got a question for you guys. Do you think Haener is going to end up being the backup, or do you think that they're going to go out and find somebody else last minute to plug that gap?
I think Haener will. I don't think them bringing Peterman in, I don't think that's any competition. I think that was more for Carr. I think that was to facilitate Carr. And also, I think we touched on it on the last pod. I don't want them to go out and spend any money on a backup QB. If Carr's not able to play, let's just suck it up. Because I'm fed up with spending 6, 7, 8 million on a backup QB and then just having a bit of a disaster with it all. The whole thing with Jameis sort of soured everything, whereby, even when your QB is injured, the backup doesn't get an opportunity anyway.
Right.
And if that's Carr's mentality, which is regardless of how I feel I'm going to play, what's the point in spending money on a backup QB? You know, we don't know if Hainer is okay. The camp talk was that he was very good last year. Obviously, in the pre-season games, he didn't look quite as good. But he's a developmental QB who took in the 4th round, I think it was. So yeah, that's my opinion. Dan, what about you, mate?
I think Peterman becomes backup for the season. I think they've probably seen enough of Hainer to think. Yeah, I think they think Hainer could probably slide to the practice squad and no one will pick him up. I think Carr spent 2-3 seasons with Peterman at Las Vegas.
2 years with him.
2 seasons. Yeah. I think the QB coach worked with him in Chicago. There's a lot of signs there that say that they're quite. Look, as I said last week, you don't ever want your backup QB to see the field, but what you want your backup QB is to have a rapport with your QB that he can sit down and talk to him about plays on the sideline and say, this is where you know this player, look at the plays and say this is where it went wrong, or look at this and have that communications relationship with the QB. And I think Peterman probably has that more so than Hainer. We'll see. It's going to be a QB. There is a QB battle at the Saints in this offseason, but it's for QB2.
Yeah.
It's not QB1.
Yeah. And they're both Carr guys, aren't they? You got
Although that said, they tried to get Justin Fields. They tried to trade for Justin Fields. Kenny Pickett. Sorry, they tried to trade for Kenny Pickett.
Yeah.
So maybe they wasn't all in on Peterman. Maybe they saw Pickett, but maybe Pickett was we'll get rid of Hainer and Pickett will be sit behind these two and see where we go. But I don't know. They've obviously got a plan. I'll trust in them. It's a new staff. They come in. They've got fresh eyes. They know what their scheme is going to be. They know who's going to fit that scheme, or they've got an idea who's going to fit that scheme best. And let's see what they go with it. But I'm not going to throw my toys out the pram over a backup QB who I don't think will see the field.
No.
And also he's going to get him paid vet minimum.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just like,
What about yourself, John?
Better than...
Mike, I was with you, and then Dad started talking. Now I don't know which way it's going. You both made very good points.
The whole point of it is I don't think it matters. I do get Dan's point about the fact, and you know we have touched on this before, which is, and I think it as well. I think it's a Carr appointment for almost like an off-field ally. You know, during games, he obviously works with him well. I don't have a major issue with it because Hainer's not going to take the number 1 spot anyway. But I would prefer, because not in a hurry, but Peterman as a NFL QB is awful.
Right.
We don't know what Hainer is as an NFL QB. So even just from a site perspective, to have a backup QB like Peterman, you end up almost feeling like a laughing stock because nobody, and I'm not being, you know, I don't mean to be disparaging to him, but nobody rates him at all. Yet he'll be our backup QB. But I do understand from Dan's perspective why that could be the case. And you know, I've touched on that myself. I agree.
Hainer was supposed to be that as well. He went to Fresno State. They're supposed to have a relationship.
Yeah.
Derek Carr was supposed to be his mentor. So you can toss it up both ways and say, ultimately, either one of these guys is a Derek Carr guy. It's just who wins out. Let's see what Hainer does without the PEDs this offseason. Alleged PEDs. He said he didn't ingest them on purpose. Anyway, I'll cut that there.
I'd rather see what Hainer does this year without the blue steel. Nice, Dan. I like it. Yeah, do it. Yeah. Do it again, mate. No, he's gonna get the camera out and take a picture. All right. So, John, so that basically means you're a little bit confused, but you might side with Dan.
Or you.
Yeah, I mean, I could go either way. but yeah, I mean, I like your point that again, that was my original thinking, is that at least with Hainer, there's the possibility of upside, you know. So
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
and he's actually, as far as the offense, it's going to be relatively new offense. So I guess it's just going to be whoever picks it up better and they're more comfortable with will get the nod. But again, if we see either guy on the field, something's gone horribly wrong. And
yeah.
So
we're in more trouble than we thought we were.
Let's be honest. Chase Daniel earned a lot of money as a backup QB, but no one was ever comfortable when he took the field at any team he played for.
Absolutely.
But he earned that money because QBs like working with him, and he was
a sideline guy, wasn't he? He was a great sideline guy. Yeah, absolutely. And and that, to your point, Dan, that may be, regardless of his play when he's on the field, that he might actually be a really good guy on the sideline. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
So where do you want to move to, my friend?
I was going to say, John, you mentioned it earlier. You're a Jersey guy, so we're going to lead into our time-honored classic question that we ask everyone. So for you, was it the Saints or the City that brought you here?
I would say it's definitely the Saints. When I was a little kid, actually, the date was November 22nd, 1987. The Saints were playing the Giants. I was sitting in the living room with my father, and in my house, you were a Yankee fan and a Ranger fan. And as far as football, he really, he didn't watch it as much as he watched those other sports. So I remember watching Saints.
I'm with you, John.
I love it.
I'm a casual Rangers fan. So whenever I'm in New York, I catch a game if they're playing. They're my ice hockey team. So.
I like it. I love it. So I was sitting there watching the Saints versus the Giants with him. I was like, man, I wish that was my team. Their helmets are so cool. And and this is coming on. This is 87. So 86, the Giants had just won the Super Bowl. I could have just stayed there and I would have enjoyed a lot of success. I would have had a lot of kids in my school that were wearing the same jerseys as me. But I would say unfortunately, but now I would say fortunately, I decided to go with the Saints at that point. And it's been mostly downhill, but then Drew Brees showed up and it's been uphill since then. So
a roller coaster which is constantly just going down.
But you can't get off. You can't get off.
Yeah, you can't get off.
Look, there's one loop. All right, and now we're going back down. So obviously you touched on it there, sort of obviously going to school and everybody else had the same sort of jersey on. What was that like, sort of being sort of almost different from the other guys? Because again, we talk a lot on this pod, whether it be from international fans over here, because even international fans over here, a Saints jersey is still a rarity. Like even at the London games, you see they're not as rare as they used to be, but you still have to look for a Saints jersey at the London games. And what would that have been like then in New Jersey, like surrounded by sort of the blue of the Giants?
Well, you got the Giants and the Jets. I mean, back then there were a lot less Jets fans than Giants fans. It's probably still that way. It wasn't easy. The first jersey I ever had was Pat Swilling. So when I would wear that to school, you'd have all the Lawrence Taylor people jawing at me like Swilling sucks, Taylor's the best, whatever. Which that's a good first jersey to have though, John. I did all right with that one. So it was definitely different, but what was kind of cool about it is when the Saints won the Super Bowl, I had people reaching out to me that I hadn't heard from in years, being like, I saw the Saints win the Super Bowl, I thought of you, and blah blah. So it was pretty cool to kind of be the one guy that everybody remembered as the lone wolf in that club. So pretty good when it came back around.
So obviously you should never ask a lady her age. Obviously you're not a lady, John. So in 1987, you would have been, give us a rough estimate of age.
In 87, 12 going on 13. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So obviously, when
12 during the football season. Go ahead. Sorry.
Did So obviously watching it from afar, and obviously, yet again, part of the thing is like we've had a number of international fans over here who became fans in the 80s, and obviously internationally it was so much more difficult to get any information on your team, even to find out results was, there have been a couple of guys who have been on the pod who said they used to have to wait for a phone call sort of a couple of days later to find out what the score was. What was the coverage like of the Saints in the sort of New Jersey area? I'm assuming there wasn't very much of it.
No, not much. Not much at all.
Failing team, no coverage whatsoever.
Yeah, again, growing up in a house that really didn't have football at the top, I didn't see a lot of football up until that point in the first place. When the Giants won the Super Bowl, my dad paid a little bit more attention, but he wasn't like super into it or whatever. Yeah. But as far as coverage, it's like one or two, maybe one national game a year. There wasn't a whole heck of a lot. You're looking in the newspaper, looking at box scores and things like that the next day, that kind of stuff before ESPN came around. I'm definitely old enough to remember before that existed. So, it's nice now. It's nice now.
Yeah. Wall-to-wall coverage both over there and overseas now, which is a wonderful thing for fans who are coming to the game now.
Even things like merch now, you can pretty much get some form of merch everywhere. Like I've managed to get Saints stuff pretty much every time I go to New York. It's few and far between, but you can still pick stuff up. Whereas I imagine 30 years ago, you would have been struggling to get anything up besides a Yankee cap and a Giants jersey.
There was one when I was in my late teens. There was one store in a mall that's relatively close to here that had it was like one rack for like each team in the NFL. It was like the only store I knew about that was like that. So that's where I would always have to go anytime I wanted anything, Saints related or whatever. So, but super cool store for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people I know come back from the States and they go, specifically in New York. They go, like fan members go, I got you something, and they bring me back like Jet stuff or Giant stuff, and I'll be like, I do support a New York team. It's neither of these teams. So I've got like a Jet 3/4 zip up and stuff. I do have a Darrelle Revis jersey just because I loved Revis when he was a player, and I've got to get.
Yeah, he was a fun watch.
Yeah, great. Yeah. So especially that first stint with the Jets. Second time round fell off pretty quick, but that first stint was a phenomenal player. Yeah, I loved watching him.
Yeah, amen.
Dan Colston that year as well, didn't he? When he had that year what year it was, but he played all of the top wide receivers in the league that year, and he locked all of them up, like every single one, week in, week out. It's just unbelievable year for a cornerback.
Yeah, he was a freak talent for sure. Yeah, he was like the buzz around here for sure. Yeah, during that time.
Yeah,
Revis Island.
They renamed Manhattan for like a couple of hours as a PR scheme.
What the hell was it? Yeah, it's a PR exercise.
Yeah, it's like they took the sign down saying Manhattan Island. It said Revis Island. It's like, you don't even play on Manhattan, but don't worry. Sorry,
John. When was the first opportunity that you got to visit the city? What year would that have been, if you can remember? And I'm assuming it may coincide with your first game at the Dome.
No, actually, I've only been to New Orleans 3 times. Twice on business. So, the first 2 times it was on business. So it was probably 2010, maybe somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And both times, I ended up, and I don't remember if it's a Hyatt or what, but there's that one hotel right next to the Superdome.
So
both times I ended up in that hotel with rooms that face the Superdome. I'd go for a walk around the Superdome. I'd be like, someday I'm going to get in this building, because it would always be like the 2 times that I went prior, it was like off season, so I never got a chance to get in there.
Yeah.
So then afterwards, it was actually 2016. I've only been inside the Superdome once. I've seen the Saints play a bunch of times against the Giants, the Jets, the Ravens. I won't go to Philly to see them against the Eagles because that's Philly. But
nobody blames you for that.
But the one time
you were sorry, John, to interrupt. You were thinking, weren't you, Dan? Because you were going to be over in New York.
Yeah,
year before last
year I was in last year I was in New York for New Year's. I was there this year as well. And we was going to go down to Philly for 2 days for the game, get the Amtrak down, stay in Philly. I'd go to the game. My wife and the kids would go and see all the, the historical significant locations and Liberty Bell and all things like that. And then the more I spoke to people, it's like, you don't want to go down to Philly on your own, wearing Saints stuff for a game. And I was like, so I ended up watching it in a bar actually in New York, near Kip. I think we talked about it when we had our episode with Joey, near Kips Bay or something like that. It was a Saints bar, so he was playing all Saints music when there was touchdowns. They'd all like a Beta Brewery beers. They were serving gumbo and all stuff like that. So it was pretty cool. That is an experience to be in New York in a New Orleans bar watching the Saints win, and people like hearing my accent, and then it was like, hang on a minute. Like doing a double take. One, that's not a New York accent. Two, it's not a New Orleans accent, which isn't too dissimilar to a New York accent at times. And then it prompted conversation. People were like, "Oh, this guy, why are you here?" and stuff. It was really enjoyable. But yeah, I swerved Philly because I was like, everyone's like, "You will get your head kicked in if you start celebrating. If you start celebrating there."
Yeah, you start mouthing off to the wrong person.
Not you'll be mildly insulted. You'll just get your head kicked in some.
Right.
Someone said to me like, if you don't buy the expensive tickets, it will be hell for you the whole time. Because they was saying like people like we used to go to soccer. Mike and I've had season tickets at soccer teams and stuff. Like you're used to getting abuse and running the gauntlet, but they were saying you'll be in your seat and people will like throw stuff at you and you haven't even interacted with them. And I was like, that's a hard pass for me. Right. I don't need that.
Yeah.
On vacation.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. The one time I did make it down for a Saints game was they ended up losing the game, which was literally the only thing that went wrong with that experience. I stayed in a hotel. I forget what hotel it was, but the Lions were staying in the same hotel as we were. So I quickly go through the roster. I'm like, who do I want to meet? And the only one on the roster I wanted to meet was Raphael Bush. So we ended up meeting him. At that time, I had started writing, and I had just interviewed Jim Henderson like a couple of weeks before that, and I mentioned I was coming. He invited me up to the press box to meet him and some of the other crew there. Here's a couple things you need to know about the Superdome. Number one, the reception inside the Superdome is terrible. Well, it was at the time. Maybe I assume it still is.
Still is.
John.
Okay, yeah.
It still is. It hasn't changed.
They say they've got Wi-Fi. It doesn't work.
Right. Yeah.
No.
And then the other thing is there are 3 different elevators. Only one of them, I guess, goes up to wherever he was. So he had texted me while I was in the Superdome which elevator take. Me and my son go to the first 2, and we're like, you know what? We're not going to get up because they're like stonewalling us. So we never got up to see Jim Henderson in there, which kind of sucked. But yeah, I've spoken to him since about it.
I think there isn't because obviously the 600s is the highest sort of point seats, but the press box is sort of on that level, but sort of because I'm sure our guys Adam and Joey Ryan and Joey, when we went to the game last year, they went outside for a vape or whatever it was. And they got in the wrong lift and they went up to a level that they'd never even been, which was above the 600s. And they were a bit lost. Sort of, they were in theory, they were in the 700s that don't exist.
Gotcha.
So I'm assuming that must be the press box elevator that they were able to jump into.
It could be, yeah. I guess there was 3. We hit 2. It didn't work out, but not a big deal. Also, in the Saints Hall of Fame that day was Tommy Myers, so I got to meet him. But I guess the coolest part was the game that I went to was December 2nd, 2016. They were playing the Lions. They lost to the Lions, but it was the Saints all 50th game where they brought back all the old players. I spent the money. Me and my son sat in the front row, and you've got like, Pat Swilling and Morton Anderson and Willie Road just walking by or whatever. It's like, it was pretty cool just to see them all out there and stuff. It was a really wild experience for sure.
Was that the game?
I like the way you.
I was listening to.
No, go on, Dan. Right? I'll carry on afterwards, my friend. Yeah.
I was only going to say, was that the game? Because I was listening to a couple of your episodes recently, and was that the game where Dylan Moore said about having to walk onto the
same game?
Like, I'm getting on there without a chair.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that. Like,
yeah. Dylan Moore. That guy was the best. But anywho,
I was saying it's like.
I was going to say that was my one time inside the dome. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it was literally as you were saying about. It's funny when you were saying like Willie Road and Pat Swilling and Morton Anderson sort of walked out on the field, and like obviously myself and Dan know that you've interviewed them as well. So it's it's that sort of thing for you. It's like the simile of both things where you see these guys, but you've had the opportunity also to talk to these guys, which is absolutely great.
Yeah, I hadn't at the time. At the time, they were
exactly.
Still,
that's the point I was making. You're starstruck watching them, and you get the opportunity thereafter. Yeah,
right. And those are the kind of guys I would say if we were, I don't know why. I don't know why God picked me, but I've been so blessed to speak to so many Saints players or former Saints players. Those are the two, Morton Anderson and Pat Swilling. Those are the two that I was the most like wide-eyed kid, talking to somebody that I had their jersey or had their poster on my wall or collected their football cards or whatever. Those are the two that I was just like completely starstruck. Yeah.
You've taken one of my future questions off me now. I'll just scrap that one through.
No. What do you got?
No, I was gonna ask you like which, but we haven't got to Life of a Saint yet. But like I was gonna say, like which players had you most starstruck? And I even made a note here that your first jersey was like Pat Swilling. Having known that you spoke to Pat Swilling, I was like, that must have been like we spoke to Delvin Breaux, and Delvin Breaux was a player. He's a more recent player, but he was a player that caught my imagination because.
Yeah,
and I think I talk about this sometimes, like we obviously draw comparisons between soccer and the NFL because we're from the UK and we're brought up in soccer. And the thing that we love most as soccer fans is when a hometown kid plays for your soccer team. So I'm a Tottenham fan. Harry Kane was from the local area. He played for the team.
Supported Arsenal.
Whatever. Delvin Breaux was from, 8, 9, 10 blocks away from the Superdome where he grew up. And he's like, to have him on, I was completely starstruck. And I said to him, I'm going to go fanboy at one point. So it must have been like, for someone like Pat Swilling, who, Delvin Breaux is a cult hero, but Pat Swilling is just Don't Patrol.
A legend, the Saints legend. Yeah.
And then you say it's your first jersey. I can't even imagine how you composed yourself to do that interview.
It's like there are certain guys that when I've spoke to them, I can remember exactly what was going on. It's like one of those moments in your life, and that was one of them for sure. Yeah, and I was actually going to mention, I've thrown out a couple of dates, like the day I became a Saints fan and the day, the day I went to the game. I was going to mention April 27th, Arsenal Tottenham. Who you guys got?
he's got Arsenal.
Well, obviously, both myself and Dan, our soccer fandom has dissipated over the years because, for me, I think money has become far too influential in our game now. One of the things that I really love about American football is the fact that you have a cap, which means. Right. There's a certain level of balance, and we saw it a few years ago when the Bengals were the worst team in the league, and then two and a half years later they were sort of on the cusp of a Super Bowl. You wouldn't get that in soccer. Basically, and that's where I started falling out of love with soccer. I was already an NFL fan, but I think that's part of the reason why my NFL fandom became even more because and yet again, we still have a rival. Funny enough, me and Dan are Arsenal Tottenham. We're the biggest of rivals, but actually we take it with a pinch of salt now, John. It's we could sort of laugh about ourselves. I remember when the Saints came to London in October 22. On the Friday night, on the Thursday night, the Friday night, we'd all been out, had a great time. Saturday, on the Friday night, I'd been out until 4:30 in the morning, so I wasn't in the best of states when I woke up, and I had to go for a brunch. And a couple of the people there were Dan and his wife. We ended up going for brunch, but then on the back of that, there was what we call the North London Derby, which is Arsenal and Tottenham. And fortunately for me, Arsenal won 3-1. But yeah, again, the rivalry that we've got now is it's sort of just eased off over the years. 10, 15 years ago, if me and Dan had been in the same pub watching a game, and we obviously didn't know each other at that time, but probably when our fandom was probably at its most raucous, that would have been completely different. We would have been effing and jeffing at each other. But, we won, they lost. Dan was laughing. Him and his wife bought me a couple of shots, and that ruined me for the whole of the Saturday. I wasn't in a very good state for the rest of the Saturday. Just on the point of soccer, John, I don't know if you follow it at all, or if you do, have you got a favourite team?
No, I don't follow. I've heard you guys mention the rivalry, so I figured it was worth bringing up or whatever.
And it absolutely is.
Essentially, I'm a Saints fan. He's a Falcons fan. That's the way to look at it.
Okay. Gotcha. But I did hear you guys mention.
No, John. Sorry, I can't let that slide. I'm afraid. All right, if we're thinking about trophies, come on, Dan. Who's a Saints fan? Who's a Falcons fan?
Okay, let's swiftly move on.
Yeah. Anyway, back to you, John. Sorry, my friend. I apologize.
I was going to say, the NFL. I heard you guys mention that they let anybody sit wherever they want, whereas in soccer or your football, they kind of quarantine people off based on who they're rooting for. So that's pretty intense stuff.
Yeah, you don't want to sit in the wrong place.
Yeah, when it can still be very, very intense. And but yeah, again, if I, as I was saying to you, John, if we went back about 15 or 20 years ago, myself and Dan were at an Arsenal Tottenham North London derby, it would be toxic. I mean, absolutely toxic, and it didn't matter where you sat. And there are certain, I both my children are adults now, and I've brought them to Arsenal games in the past where I've ended up having confrontations with people purely because of their behaviour in front of my kids at the time, because it's just unwarranted. It's just gratuitous. It's like there's no need for it.
Yeah, it's like going to an Eagles Raiders game.
Yeah.
Either stadium.
Either stadium. Just there's a degree of obnoxiousness that comes with it.
So is there anything, because I know you guys have been to the US a number of times, is there anything in the US as far as a spectator that kind of compares to watching soccer in the UK, or not really?
In terms of watching,
like the atmosphere and like what
I mean, the only time I've been at I've been to multiple American sport events in America, and the only time I've heard people have a bit of chatter was I went to see the Rangers played. I want to say it was the Carolina Hurricanes in probably around 2011, I think, and there was a bit of chirping going on between fans in that game, but it wasn't aggressive. There was a guy sitting there in a Houston Astros cap, and the Rangers fans were just giving him absolute shit for it. It's just like, you're not even. There isn't even a Texas team playing here. What are you doing? Like he's like, the guy was like, I'm from Queens, and I was like, well, why do you support the Astros then? Like, you've got a team just round the corner. It's like,
he woke up and shows violence wearing that hat. So but as far as like as far as like the atmosphere and like, I know like in soccer, like you get like the crowd doing different songs and stuff like that for whether it's for the team or for individual players or whatever. Is there anything comparable in the States or not really? That's kind of its own.
I would say no, because I think they're entirely different crowds. The thing about it is, like, obviously we've got the benefit of being Saints fans. So yeah, again, we've touched on it a number of times. When you go there, especially for Brits, if you have to make the effort and spend the money and stuff, you always appreciate it. You never take it for granted. But obviously, myself and Dan had the opportunity to sort of get there at the tail end of when they were still really great, and at sort of the back end of 17, 18, 19, where the atmosphere in the dome was electric. I mean, it was electric. It's a different type of electricity that you get in a soccer stadium for a really big game. It's one of those, it's obviously the way, you know, Dan was talking about the fridge and it just popping up on his phone, but the way the algorithms work anyway. So I'm a fan of NFL. So on social media platforms, I watch NFL related stuff, Saints related stuff. Right. But occasionally it will throw out a fight at an NFL game. And I sort of, I chuckle to myself a little bit because it's quite pleasant watching an NFL fight in a, you know, when a couple of fans have had a little bit too much to drink and they go at it. I chuckle quite sort of, probably quite snootily, because if you saw that fight in a soccer game in the UK, there would be about 50 people involved, and every item around you are being used to sort of leather someone.
Everything's a weapon.
Yeah, exactly.
I would say I'd agree with from that point of view. I think it's coming in a little bit in American soccer.
Yeah.
I think it's been slightly manufactured to start with, but I think it's taken on. You look at teams like the Seattle Sounders and teams like that, they've definitely got that kind of following where people get really amped up for the games. But that said, I've never in my life witnessed an atmosphere in a stadium like I did for the NFC Championship game in 2019. No. Mm-hmm. Like no soccer game has ever come close. And that wasn't just me as a fan of the team. Like I've never ever witnessed an environment like that where it was so loud and everyone was so raucous, but in the same time, not in a bad way. It was like I've never experienced it. We do need to go to college games because I think, you know, I've seen videos of, you know, Death Valley and those places, and I think we do need to go to those games to see where I think that's going to be the most comparable sporting event in the US is, you know, those big rivalry college games. I think that will be the closest comparison I would expect to find.
Yeah,
like going to see like Alabama, LSU. I reckon that would be pretty close.
Yeah,
to it.
Yeah, because John, like the.
Good.
Sorry, literally just to end on that, I was going to say comparably, if you think about it, like we touched on it there, Arsenal, Tottenham in UK soccer are a big rivalry, and then it would be the Saints and the Falcons. And yet again, even though I love being disparaging to the Falcons, they just haven't got the passionate support to make those games, especially now. You know, you look at their own stadium, half the time it's, you know, 3/4 full, if that. And so you don't get that energy, and rivalry quite often brings an energy. And even though there are most hated rivals, the energy within the stadium I don't think is there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. One other thing, I don't want to get off the soccer yet because there's one other thing I wanted to mention. I didn't do it this year, but usually every March Madness, I'll put together some kind of 64-person bracket. Last year I did Saints defenders, like who's the greatest all-time Saints defender, put together this big bracket. The year prior to that, I put together a bracket of the greatest like sportscasters of all time. And knowing who my audience is, you know, there's a lot of familiar names in the States, you know, like the Stuart Scotts and the Marv Levy's and whoever it might be. And in one of the brackets, I put, and I want to make sure I get his name right, Martin Tyler, I put in one of the brackets because of I saw the documentary about like the Aguero goal that he called.
Yeah.
So I put him in one of the brackets as a 16 because I didn't think many people would know who he even was. I think that was the single most upset people like reaching out to me over anything I've ever posted on Twitter. A lot of people are like, what the hell is wrong with you putting him at 60?
So, how dare you? Yeah.
Yeah, I went back and watched some of his other calls or whatever. He's pretty entertaining. He's pretty good.
Yeah, him and John Butler, would you say? They're on a rush for.
Yeah, they're the premier ones. They're the ones that everybody thinks of. There have been far better. Barry Davis for me was a guy called Barry Davis was always better than Motson. You got Clive Tilsley. You've got a number of people that we could put up there, but they are icons. You know, where John Motson, I think he passed away last year, didn't he, Dan? And you know, and literally that. Yeah, and there were minutes of silence at football grounds and stuff. So hugely respected people.
You're forgetting our friend Paul Mitchell. Guest of the show.
Paul Mitchell's been on there.
So one of the guests on the show is a gentleman called Paul Mitchell, who's a Saints fan in Scotland, and he's a football commentator in Scotland, and he's one of the premier football commentators on Scottish football. We came on the show.
That's pretty cool.
And So
he also does. He's done rugby and hurling and loads of stuff. But yeah, he's one of the premier sort of Scottish football commentators. But
he's like Al Michaels of Scotland.
Yeah. They're funny, aren't they? Because when you watch them, because like commentating on soccer is, I think, it's a really different exercise because it's it's consistent. You know, there aren't so many breaks in plays. It's consistent. You don't probably have as much time to get out facts about sort of players and stats and stuff. So there's just a difference in their cadence. Actually, I think the way that commentators over here commentate on the game. And God, look, we've got some brilliant ones over here, but my favourite are always the Spanish-speaking countries. They're absolutely phenomenal. Whenever there's a World Cup, and if we're playing someone in South America, if England playing somewhere in South America, and the South American team score against England, you will always hear a repeat of the broadcast on the English TV channel that you're watching of the Argentinian commentator or the Chilean They are phenomenal. They just put us to shame. They really do.
Gotcha. But we can all agree that the best international commentary ever was the German commentary of
the stiff arm. It's my favourite thing ever.
So good.
It was such a good. It was just the excitement in their voice because it's just like.
I was cracking up laughing.
I can just say that I don't often, and I haven't really very often bookmarked stuff on Twitter. That was the first thing I ever bookmarked on Twitter because I loved it so much. Honestly, I was crying laughing watching that. So that was my first bookmark ever on X.
Right.
Twitter.
Yeah. So. I don't understand a single word of German, but you understood exactly what he was saying throughout the entire call.
It's the laugh. It's the laugh. It just kills. It just makes it. It's absolutely phenomenal.
Those Germans love their NFLs, or they love their NFL.
God,
that's so cool.
They really, really do. Yeah, absolutely. They really do. Paul, John, just a quick one. How did you get into the journey of journalism? Because we haven't touched on that. So, obviously, a guy born in Jersey who's supporting the Saints. What was the pathway for getting involved in that side of things? How did that come about?
Actually, it started out, I would just post things like I do now, just post things on Twitter about the Saints or whatever. I had someone from lastwordonsports.com DM me, and they're like, we've been watching your content. Have you ever considered writing? So I was like, not really. They're like, well, if you want to, throw together a sample of something you want to write and send it over. And if it looks good, we'll edge it to the staff. So I did that. It was actually an article about, I think it was actually the 10-year anniversary of the Saints versus Atlanta, return to the Dome. So I put something together on that. Yeah. It worked out. I spent probably 18 months with that site, and it was doing, everything was good or whatever. I got to interview a couple of players over there, but the more I did it, the more I realized that like I didn't want to do the day-to-day stuff that a lot of the other Saints. I mean, like you've got, John Hendricks and Ross Jackson and Bob Rose, and you've got all these guys out there. Nobody needs to hear another version of that, coming out of my mouth. So I went back and thought about if I wanted to keep doing it, which I did, but I just wanted to focus on the player interviews. That's where I had the most fun because if you gave me like an hour to watch like highlights or an hour to watch like a football life documentary, I'm going to pick the documentary because to me, it's just more interesting kind of hearing about, what the guys went through and some of the stories that you may not know about. So I decided to then go over to Canal Street Chronicles. They took me in. That's when Hendricks was still there. Then I said, look, I'll write for you. You don't have to pay me, but it's not going to be all the time. It's going to be whenever I can get a hold of players. And he's like, yeah, no problem. We'll set a section on the site just for those specific articles. So was lucky enough to interview a whole bunch of people. And the great thing about that is like once you get in, like you guys worked with Delvin Breaux. Once you get in with Delvin Breaux, Delvin Breaux might help you connect with the next guy who helps you connect with the next guy. And it's just like, once you're in, like people just, it's almost like it's a fraternity where they want to help you out and want to see you grow or whatever. Yeah. And that's the other thing about the Saints community as a whole. Like everybody, it's like like the rising tide, like everybody wants to help everybody. It's going back to 1987, it might not have, felt like the right decision at the time, but it definitely has worked out well. So
it's panned out okay. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think I ended up doing 30, around 30, 32 articles, somewhere in that ballpark, high 20s, low 30s, something like that. Of different guys that I spoke to, and that kind of led me to I'm assuming at some point we're going to talk about the book, but that kind of led me to the book. Like I spoke to like 5 or 6 guys that were from that Super Bowl team in that 30-ish range. And I started hearing things that I didn't know. I didn't know if it was because I live in Jersey and these stories are in the local papers, but they're just not making their way up north. Yeah. Or if it was just stuff that was just coming off the cuff and the players were sharing with me. But I had enough of those instances where I was like, you know what, maybe instead of doing these articles, maybe I could just mush a whole bunch of these things together and make a book out of it. And so far so good. Everybody, again, everybody's so nice.
Sorry, John, just going back to your book. Just going back to book to talk about your book. So your book is about 2009, isn't it? It's about what happened around that, rather than the sort of normal stories we've heard. So, because I know I saw a clip where you were talking to Mickey Loomis and you asked him about who was the most valuable sort of player or personality around that time. And is that what the essence of the book is about?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just I kind of open it up to the player and say, hey, look, is there something that it's like rarely told stories or stories that kind of helped shape that season? It's not really getting into X's and O's so much, but it's a lot of like behind the scenes stuff. I mean, you get all sorts of like when you start to just open things up and let the players start to talk, it's like you get all sorts of like weird stuff, like Scott Shanley talking about a bet that he made with his neighbor before the season started, or you get Pierre Thomas today mentioned, an interaction he had with Jeremy Shockey in a bar on Halloween. And it's just like,
wait, John, can you give us an exclusive on that? I'm joking. Me and Dan will get very excited about Jeremy Shockey in a bar.
You said the magic words, don't I?
Yeah, I'll tell you that one because Pierre, see, like talking to Pierre today, when I first got on the phone with him, he's like, I don't know what you want from me. That was so long, that was so long ago. I don't really remember much. And then you just say one or two things, and then you just sit back and enjoy the show, because then he goes for like a half an hour straight of just spitting out story after story. But the Shockey one is not going to make the book. But basically the story was, he went out, a friend of his came from Chicago to watch one of the games. And he's out at a bar by himself and with his friend in New Orleans. And Shockey walks in, and he said to Pierre, "Where's your costume?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm not wearing a costume." And he said to Shockey, "Where's your costume?" And he had just a Jeremy Shockey jersey on. He's like, "Yeah, this is my costume." So I was like, that sounds like such a Jeremy Shockey thing to do, like to wear your own jersey.
So Jeremy Shockey was, I mentioned Darrell Revis. Jeremy Shockey was when I first got into American football, was one of my favorite players when I didn't have a team, because he's such a striking image. You saw him in the Giants. He's got the Giants blue on. He's got the eagle tattooed on his arm, the flag. He's got the long blonde hair. He's an absolute man mountain. I saw him, I was like, this guy. And he was one of those players. So when he signed with the Saints, I was over the moon. Fast forward how many years, I messaged him on Instagram, and I was like, I'd love to, so I've got 4 jerseys up in the bar. I've got Juice McAllister, Roman Harper, Jeremy Shockey, and Thomas Morstead. So I tried to message all 4 of them, say, would you come on our podcast? I've got your jerseys up in my bar, they're signed, they're framed, etc. Shockey came back to me and went, man, I can't share some of those stories from back then. He's like, I'll get arrested. I wanted to go back and say, statute of limitations, you're probably good. But I think that's his polite way of saying, no, we're good. But I know that I replied to you, John, and said, if you can get Shockey for the book, that's the player I'd love to hear from, because I just imagine he's such a character. He seems quite chilled now. I follow him, and he's like, looks like he's down in Florida, he just chilled out lifestyle. But I'd love to hear some of these stories.
Yeah, Morstead, I would say on that list, Morstead's probably going to be the easiest one for you guys to get. He's so interactive with everybody on social or whatever. So I think he's going to be the easiest for you guys to get on your show. But
he's in Dan's pipeline.
Oops. Oh, perfect.
We've had some back and forth, but I just need to get him into downtime and then circle back around on him again.
God, he's too busy having kids, that guy.
I know, it's like number 5 now, is
it? Too busy having kids, also contract negotiations, all that sort of thing.
Right, yeah.
So you sort of forget these people sometimes have life that gets in the way. So,
Or maybe he listened to some of those After Dark episodes and went, no, I'm not sure. He's half Brit, so he knows what we're like. He knows what
exactly.
We're like.
There we go.
Have a word with your mum. She'll tell you.
I've got a list of players here that I put together that that I've seen that you've spoken to, certainly and you've put content out on YouTube, John. So Carl Turley, Stan Brock, Morton Anderson, Jake Cupp, Mike Karney. I really enjoyed the Mike Karney episode. I think that was because he's one of the players you've interviewed on a longer format that you've put out, who was in the team just as my fandom was beginning. So, one of the things that I like about your content that you put out is there are a lot of younger Saints fans, and you're putting out content that allows them to connect to players that they've never seen play, or they wouldn't necessarily have any notion of who they are beyond seeing their name up in the Ring of Honor in the Dome and things like that. Like Sammy Knight, Willie Rolfe, Pat Swelling, Jim Everett interview I really enjoyed as well. That was a fun one that you did there.
He's fun.
Yeah, he was and he's so charming as well.
Right.
Like when you're listening to him, he's got the charisma oozes through, and I imagine from being a quarterback, that's just something you have to have, that charisma to get men behind you. I was going to say, what is I've got several questions here, which all are on the same sort of thing. What is your favorite moment of any of these interviews you've done, like if there's one moment where you've been talking to a player and you're like, that point right there was just, maybe it was Swelling, maybe it was Rolf, Anderson, one of those guys, or something completely different.
My favorite moment, that's a loaded question.
Hard,
now,
I don't want to detract from any other moments, but is there?
No, there's a couple of things that kind of jump off the page for me. One would be when I first started doing the writing for Last Word on Sports, before I got over to Canal Street Chronicles. I was thinking to myself, wouldn't it be cool if I'm some schmuck from Jersey, like who am I to even ask any of these players to interview them? But I sent a DM to Kyle Turley, and I said, hey, is there any chance you can put together some time? I'd love to ask you some questions. And like 2 minutes later, he messaged me back his cell phone number. I'm like, oh shit! Now I got actually like, oh no, because I thought it was just pie in the sky or whatever. But he kind of like opened up the whole thing. So that for sure is one of them. But as far as the interviews that I've done, I would say the one that probably sticks with me the most is when Morton Anderson was talking about that 20-month gap that he had between when he wasn't playing football and everybody was telling him, hey, look, just hang it up, you had a great career, and he was trying to chase the points record, and just like the way he described how he was just unwilling to stop until he got that record or whatever, and just perseverance. It was just, I'm just getting goosebumps thinking about it. It was just such a cool answer, and just like the way he talked about it was so cool.
And it was because when I was listening to that, it was like, because it wasn't only like his perseverance, it was like when he was talking about going to the field in his full pads and helmet and practicing, and then getting kicked off the field by a group of kids who had their
like little leaguers or something. Yeah,
exactly. And this is like obviously a now Hall of Famer who was, yet again, he was very honest about it, wasn't he? He was talking about it. He was like, he was 45 at the time. It was like, it wasn't like, I'm 28 and I've suddenly got no opportunity. He was obviously, for most teams, like past the sell-by date, for want of a better expression. But that perseverance and the way that he just, even though he felt a little bit aggrieved at being kicked off when he was practicing, and that was a bit I loved, in full kit. And he was saying it was a mixture of everything, wasn't it? Just turning up and just a mixture of everything. I'll just do it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, whatever he grabs that day. Yeah.
Yeah, I think at one point when he said he had a Falcons helmet on, I really did punch the screen. But that, it was admirable that he had that drive, but understanding why he had it, because he knew how near he was to the points record, and he just thought, I need that opportunity to break that. Yeah, that was phenomenal. Yeah, I get that, John. Really get that, my friend.
Yeah, so that's probably the best answer to any question. Yeah, I've ever asked anybody. Yeah, it was so cool. I mean, just hearing him describe it or whatever, it's super wild stuff. Again, like, I got no business being privileged to that kind of stuff, but Dan, you mentioned, like, just, some of the podcast or whatever, some of the YouTube stuff that I've put up or whatever. That's the kind of stuff that it was like, I wrote the articles, and a lot of that stuff is in the articles or whatever, but a lot of people are not going to look for articles about old Saints or whatever. So I just felt like I've got a vault of really cool stuff. And I was like, I don't even care about being like a YouTuber or whatever. I just felt like I just needed to put this somewhere where it can be enjoyed by whoever for like years to come. So it was more like a passion project than it was anything else. But yeah, it's been a fun ride. And there's a lot of stuff still to come. I got, actually, Randy Mueller episode coming up in it's going to go up in like half an hour or whatever. But there's probably another 20 or so that I've got to film. And then as I'm speaking to each one of these guys for the book, I told them, hey, once I run out of these interviews, I want to get you on and start doing like what you guys are doing, like do like live interviews. And this way it's not as boring to watch. Cause I mean, those are good to like maybe turn on if you've got a commute or whatever. but it's basically like a still frame for most of the interview. So not the best video content, but
it does give like you where you put the stats up, it gives people like they know who the player is and those core stats. And I do like the way that when you do it, you start from childhood. It's like, how did you start playing football? And like for us, and I know I said obviously you give us an insight into those players that played before we were fans of the sport or the team. But also, it's really interesting for us across the pond to hear about that journey from being a child to playing Pop Warner to college and what college is about, because that's alien to us. There is no concept of college football here. You're attached to the team off the bat when you sign, whether you're 10 or 18 or 15, and that's until the team cut you or release you. So I think it gives up that. I don't think biased is the right word, but it gives us so much more insight and so much more valuable to us as fans, not growing up in the US, to get that insight into what those players went through. And I did have other questions about favourite episodes. I'm not going to ask you to do that because it's probably like picking a favourite child for you. I've got my favourite episode, and I would, or not necessarily episode, my favourite interview content you've put out, and I will say what that is in a second. Is there two questions? Did you have any starstruck moments when you was interviewing people that were just like, you was just like, pull yourself together, John? And secondly, who do you want in the future who's currently a Saint would be your first, like, I need to get him when he's retired?
Yeah.
Okay. The starstruck. Well, Mike, to go back to your question, there's one more moment I wanted to mention, and I forget which one of you mentioned the Mike Karney interview. But when he described himself crying on the sideline when they had to return to the dome after that, I mean, it's good, so good. But so I didn't want to go.
That footage is out there as well. You can see the players.
Yeah. I did. I put together a short and I overlaid the video of that to him talking about it. So that I didn't want to go without mentioning that.
But also, John, it's like that. That's an interesting point, because obviously for Saints fans, whether they be old or new, who may. Yet again, we forget about modern technology that we live with now. There are so many fans, even from that era, who are fans of it, who didn't realise. And he, obviously very eloquent. He realised that the situation in New Orleans and parts of Louisiana were far worse than what they were going through. But it was also the fact that you sort of forget what they had to go through and then have to come back to at times. And they've all got things like families and, all this sort of stuff. And that was a wonderful insight into what was an absolutely awful period of time for the people of that area, but also looking at it from a different perspective, and it was a different perspective that he was looking at. And then obviously the sideline where it all caught up with him, it was because that was so emotional. That must have been so emotional for every player on that field.
Right.
Yeah.
Amen. For sure. But Dan, getting back to your question. All right. Starstruck for sure was Pat Swilling. I definitely, I had to, a couple of deep breaths as I saw his his name popping up on my phone. I was just like, oh my God, this is really happening. And then to hear the voice, and you've heard the voice like a million times before in interviews and stuff like that, was definitely surreal. It was definitely, again, like I said before, one of those moments in your life where you're never going to forget where you were, what you were doing, and everything like that. As far as who I would want to get next, I would say if there's somebody that's on the top of the list, and again, I've got the open door to go back and do more of these articles, and also I'll do the videos and everything like that. But once I get done with the book, to get back to the interviews or whatever. Outside of the 09 guys, the number one guy I would love to interview would definitely be Jim Mora. I would love and Willie Road gave me his number. I've texted him a couple of times. He didn't respond. I've spoken to his son saying, hey, look, I'd love to do a father-son interview or whatever, just trying to do whatever I can to get at him. But Jim Mora would be the definitely the one that I would want to do first. If we're talking about like more recent guys, or I'm trying to think of somebody that I would think about a really cool story. I mean, I would say Breeze, but that's too easy because, see, I love Breeze, but I really feel like he's too good at interviews. Like he would give you, he would give you the right answer to everything. It would just, you could almost write his answers down before you even spoke to him, you know? Malcolm Jenkins might be a cool one. Speak to Malcolm Jenkins. Nick Fairley might be a cool one just to kind of see where his head's at and how everything kind of ended for him.
Because that's a very interesting subject matter on a couple of different levels, isn't it? Yeah. Right. You're not only talking about professional career, you're talking about personally as well. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And it's funny, like, I think it was in the last episode you guys were talking about the Saints medical staff and how they they missed on Bro and they missed on Michael Thomas and they missed on Willie Road is another one that they kind of missed on a few injuries, and then he got to Kansas City and cleaned all that stuff up. But at the same time, the Saints have kind of discovered, I think there's been a couple of situations where they've discovered things with guys that, you know, were like life-threatening, you know, so
a long step with a heart condition.
Yeah. So it's, I don't know what to make of them. It's kind of hit or miss. It's unfortunate that on the misses, that's for sure, because it's screwed up people's careers.
It's like they're really good at like day-to-day medical things that normal people have, but they're not great on sports stuff, which is where you really need them to be showing their expertise. So I did mention of all the content I've listened to, and this is going to surprise a lot of people, I think, my favorite content you put out was the interview with Junior Gillette, because I thought that showed me a completely different side to him as a person. And he's someone who shows a lot of bravado on social media, but he actually opened up quite a lot to you, talking about, you know, the difficulties he had, you know, being a guy who came over from Haiti and adapting and almost like that relationship ending with the Saints being like a breakup of a marriage, and he wasn't ready for it and it just spiraled. And I thought that was a really insightful piece. You got much more out of him than I'd ever heard on that topic. And he almost, for someone who you think of as being such a brash character from his social media persona, he showed a level of vulnerability, I thought, being open with you. I really enjoyed it. And it was only a short piece that you put up. I thought it was really, really good to get that kind of content out of him.
Junior, I would say, well, first of all, I'll make that the next episode that I put up, this way you can get the audio version of it. But yeah, he definitely, it was not what I expected when I got into it with him, that's for sure. He's another one, like, trying to think of the right way to say this. He I don't want to say loose cannon, but he's definitely like hit or miss with which Junior Gillette you're going to catch him in. Yeah. I actually spoke to him about doing an autobiography, and he was into it. He's like, you've always stood by me. I respect what you do. I'm in. He's like, you can write it. We'll get together and we'll whatever you need, I'll give it to you. And I think it was like the next day he put something anti-Semitic up online, and it was, I was just like, you know what, maybe I just need to just not go down that road. But yeah, I had messaged him one day and I was like, hey, any interest in doing this? He's like, yeah, I'm not doing anything. I'll hop on a call right now. So I was like, all right, let's go. So then I started routing to some questions, and like you said, like he showed a lot of vulnerability, a lot of pain, so it was definitely interesting seeing that side of him. Of course, when I put the article up, you're going to get some people in the comments that are just going to say stuff about the belt and all that other kind of stuff. It's like every time he posts anything, it's the same replies from probably a lot of the same people over and over again. Yeah. But that's a good point. He was definitely it was definitely a different version of him. And like when you go back and watch some of the video, I mean, he was just a menace on the field. I mean, like there's no denying what he could do on the field. I mean, just Just
him
tough.
and Cam double teaming. Like, some of the videos, some of the clips that you put on the video that you put out as well. You just see, like, if Cam missed, Junior was there to tidy up and like but he's burned bright and quickly. I think is probably the analogy to use for Junior Gillette.
Right.
Good big contract, and then just went.
But also going back to the point that you were saying, Dan, about the fact that when you watched it, it's like, obviously you were saying he opened up a lot more. And the one thing I was saying, it's not excusing behavior and it's not excusing comments or whatever. But obviously a lot of trauma happens in people's lives that people just don't understand. And so the individual is the individual, and it's based on the trauma that they've had. Without a shadow of doubt, people like that need help. Whether or not they're willing to accept it or whether they're going to get it, hey, look, that's a different matter. But, you know, people's lives, you know, can create trauma, and it can be part of the reason for behavior. And we all have to be aware of that as well.
Yeah, he's definitely carrying around a lot. I think he still is. I think, then feeling like he was blackballed by the NFL and suing them and feeling like he can still play, but he's not getting his chance. I know he carries a lot around with him, and that goes all the way back to, like you said, to Haiti and some of the conditions he grew up in and everything. Tough stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. No, without a doubt. Dan, have you got anything else you want to ask John? You obviously a lot of the questions that you're going to ask about.
I've got loads, but I'm conscious of time.
Well, John, I'm going to ask you. Are you okay for time, my friend?
It's only 5:40 here, so we can keep rolling. You know, we still got sunlight out, so we're good.
All right, stop showing off.
Only 4 hours in front at a minute.
Yeah, I know, which is a blessing for us normally. Yeah, it's either going to be 5 or 6. So actually, me and Dan were really pleased that we were going to get in this pod away this early. Yeah, so it's all good.
Catch you while you're sober.
Yeah.
Well, getting there.
I've run out of Diet Coke. I'm not mainlining any shots on this one because I respect you, John, and I don't want us to get.
Hey, look, we're all friends here. We're all friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you guys coming over for any games this coming season?
Well, funnily enough, we've got a UK WhatsApp group, and obviously we're talking in that. And the thing that we're looking at doing at the moment, Dan's going to be going over to New Orleans around the New Year, aren't you, Dan?
Yes, I'm hoping for a home game during that period.
Yeah,
but
also a lot of the UK guys are hoping that the game in New York is sandwiched between either a game in New Orleans or a game after in New Orleans. So I think there's a majority of people who want to go to either New Orleans and then to New York, but however the schedule works out, New York to New Orleans. So
I mean, I don't want to raise a technicality, but it's actually in New Jersey. But the game,
no, but all right, you've raised the technicality.
I wasn't even going to go there.
No. But yeah, we all know it's over in New Jersey. But obviously, so what we're saying is that we're hoping to be in New Jersey, but we're going to stay in New York. So anyway, we're going to be in that area. And also hopefully New Orleans, depending on the schedule. But also Dan and his wife are thinking about the possibility of flying out. Are you going to fly out to New Jersey or New York?
Well, JFK is cheaper to fly to, but
there you go.
Yeah, so my wife's. I mentioned before we started recording. My wife's like she has to go to New York once a year. She feels about New York the way I feel about New Orleans. New York's a close second for New Orleans, but. So she said, as soon as I said they was playing the Giant, he was like, "Oh well, we're definitely going then." I was like, "I don't really have the holiday for work." She was like, "We're just the weekend." I was like, "Look, you haven't got to tell me twice. I get a chance to go to see yeah." So I went to was in New York over Christmas. I want to watch the Giants play the Rams. It's just not the same as watching the Saints. We went to I don't know if he was there. We went to see the Saints play the Jets when was that? 2021.
That was 2021. AK
Okay,
I think he'd come
Taysom
back off his suspension or injury and had a game.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that was a great game because there was not a lot of Jets fans left in the stadium, and we were
No,
partying and dancing.
We
were being horribly. It was like being at a soccer game, John. We were being horribly disrespectful.
It was the same weekend as SantaCon, I think. So you had loads of people just in town dressed as Santa. It was it's interesting.
Yeah, I didn't, John. I didn't realise it was going on. I sort of went over it, and to be fair, it was my first time in New York. I'd never been to New York before, and obviously Dan, his wife, and his family were over there, and I met them one night in New York for dinner. Dan's son really wasn't dealing very well with jet lag, was he? And just had to go back to the room. But yeah, I didn't get on the Saturday. Was it the Saturday? I just didn't get why all
Saturday
these people
was
were running around.
Yeah,
I didn't get why all these people were running around in Santa costumes. I was like, where have I come into? I've got, I live in London. I don't get this.
That's pretty funny that was your intro to New York City. That's great.
Yeah, it was.
It's like, is this like a thing? Like what?
It was really, honestly, it blew my mind for a period of time. But yeah, it's like Dan goes to New York all the time, as he said, with himself and his wife. I've been now there, I think 3 times since I've been there because I love it as well. But New Orleans is the place that I'll always go to. So if we can get the pair of them together in one trip, that'll be phenomenal. That'll be absolutely phenomenal.
Awesome. I'm sure I'll be going to the Giants game. And then the other game that I was considering, my daughter, for obvious reasons, is suddenly a Chiefs fan. So we're thinking about going out there for the Saints Chiefs, but we'll see.
Yeah. I'm surprised Dan hasn't temporarily thought about becoming a Chiefs fan. He's a bit of a Swiftie as well, his son.
To be fair, I prefer Jason Kelsey to Travis. But I'm not denying that. Well, I went and see her in LA. She was phenomenal. One of the best concerts I've ever been to in my life. And I've been to some pretty heavy rock concerts and iconic bands, but she was something else. She was unbelievable. Really, really, really was good. But I digress. How do you, obviously, John, New York, that kind of area, great food, pizza, all bagels, all bits like. How do you find the New Orleans cuisine when you're down there? You got any favorites?
Well, yeah, I tried everything that since I've been everything. Well, I don't eat seafood, so that kind of eliminates
takes a lot off the table.
Half. But yeah, I've tried all the touristy stuff. I've tried, like a little bit of everything. I will say that the next time I go to New Orleans, it's going to be way more calculated. Like I went down there and just like, I'll just try this place or whatever. Yeah. Like I didn't know anybody last time I went down there. Now this time I'll get, there'll be a whole itinerary of what I need to get done, where I need to eat and everything. So this way I'll hit all the best spots as opposed to the popular ones.
Let us give you a invite into our Discord because we've got like literally channels that recommend where to eat. We get a couple of guys from New Orleans in there. So if you we'll give you an invite to if you want to pop in and just see.
Yeah, for sure.
Keep your tabs on it.
Yeah.
What's your like? I'm gonna flip back. What's your have you got like a favorite pizza spot in the area in like New York, New Jersey? Like, what's your best pizza?
There's one spot in Brooklyn. It's called Maria Pizzeria. It's like a little hole in the wall spot right on Fort Hamilton Parkway. I usually stop there either. It's right over the Verrazano. So I usually stop there either on my way in or my way out, depending on what time it is. That's usually pretty consistently good. A lot of there's in Manhattan, there's John's Pizza, which is good. But again, like once you start getting into the places that everybody knows are good, if you're not like calling ahead and ordering a pizza to go an hour in advance or something like that. If you just want to walk in there and get something, then you're just standing in line for 45 minutes to get a seat. And there's, Spumoni Gardens and all. So like, I try to avoid the really popular places. I mean, it's once in a while it's worth waiting, but for the most part, I try to, there's a couple spots in Jersey that are pretty decent too. But yeah, I try to avoid the super popular ones.
I'm a Bleecker Street pizza guy, but that has got more busy every time I go. It's
That's the problem.
Yeah.
That's the problem, especially when you get all these these bloggers and podcasters and everything going in.
You've got to go there. I also like and he's obviously famous, but Best Pizza over in Williamsburg, which is guys. He did the pizza show on Vice, but I like them over there in Brooklyn. They're pretty good as well. So there's your tips, Mike. Cut the places.
Yeah,
Maria's.
Yeah, but you're going to be there at the same time anyway, so you can just take me there.
Yeah,
anyway.
I go hardcore. I'll eat it 3 times a day. Like,
I won't do that. But just going quickly back to the point that you were saying, John, when you next go down to New Orleans, and you were saying obviously you've now got all these people who have given you hints and tips. But the great thing is also you sort of touched on it. You've now got a community of people that you can sort of touch base with as well and meet up. And that's the thing that's wonderful for a couple of guys from the UK who are going over in, God, it's under 3 weeks, isn't it, Dan? We're going over
2.5 weeks.
Yeah. And we've already got things set up with just people we've met either on Twitter or via YouTube or
we might be hooking up with Delvin. Delvin Bro said to us, like, if you want to hang out, let us know. So that'd be amazing.
So, but that's the wonderful thing. And yet again, quite often social media can get a really, really bad name, but sometimes social media is an absolutely wonderful thing. And it's obviously how we've come to know yourself, John. And it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you.
I appreciate it.
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for sort of spending the time having a chat with a couple of Brits who are Saints fans and a guy from New Jersey who's a Saints fan.
There you go.
I think and that was the thing. We've all got relative stories. I sort of said to Dan, didn't I, about the fact that it's not only the international fan base. It's like even in the US, it's like when you've got somebody who's from Jersey who ends up supporting the Saints. Like in 1987, when you were there in your Swilling shirt and nobody else looks like that because they're all wearing blue, it's incredible. But it is incredible that you went from that to supporting that city in and that team in that city, and I think that's a wonderful thing. But so thank you very much, John, for your time.
My pleasure. You guys never disappoint. I love your content. Actually, I listen to you guys a lot going in and out of the city. Anytime I gotta go, sit in traffic going into Manhattan or whatever. So always a pleasure, and I appreciate you guys keeping me company on all those rides.
Yeah, and John, by the way,
those are long rides. Then
they can be.
Are.
If you don't leave at the right time, they can be.
Yeah.
Do you want to just fire out what your social media contacts are, just in case people aren't aware and that so they can follow you, my friend?
Yeah, it's all. Can't get the camera right. It's all right.
I think it's running.
At St. John Butler. That you'll find. Yeah, there you go. You'll find me on all the different platforms or whatever. YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Threads. I think that's it. But you can find me. I love interacting with people. You can hit me in the DMs. You comment on my videos. I'm definitely going to comment back. So I love chopping it up with Saints. I look forward to the Discord. That should be fun too. So again, I appreciate you guys having me on. This was a lot of fun.
No,
John,
I've really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And,
thanks, John.
And again, take care, guys.
Yeah, take care, mate.
Take care.
You got it. Bye.